Hello everybody and welcome to part number 2 in my Vatsim tutorial series. You join me here on the ground at Stansted in the wonderful iFly 737 MAX 8 in the very well made Ryanair livery on stand number 43. In today's episode we're going to cover through what it takes to request an IFR clearance, how to get to that stage, how to request your IFR clearance and how to get to the pushback stage. Now first of all I'm going to talk a little bit about Navigraph, what it is and how it's best useful. So this is the Navigraph charts client. We've already done a little bit of preparation beforehand. So what you'll be able to see is you can see we've got the ground charts for Stansted, lots and lots of information about what charts are which, Charlie East, Charlie Middle, Charlie West for examples. And if we select this button here, it will also generate where we are, which as I say is on stand number 43 within the airport. Now, what I've managed to do is I've imported our flight from SimBrief, and that will now input all the details in, showing us the flight that we've planned to Manchester. And you can do so by simply pressing Import Flight here, Import from SimBrief, and then that will automatically give you the options. We want Stansted to Charlie Charlie, being Manchester, and that automatically puts some details in. Now we have got some options as to whether or not we want to input some data like the arrivals that we are planning and the approaches. So for example, this would give us the different ILS approaches, localizer approaches, RNAVs, VORs. We're not going to go into too much detail there because this isn't a tutorial on how to fly, this is a tutorial on how to get better at Vatsim, or those that are beginners on how to actually do Vatsim properly. Now when you do download Navigraph, you'll also get a program that looks like this, which is called Navigraph Hub. And this allows you to update all of your AIRAC data and your navigational data for different aircraft, and you see that it allows you to upgrade for your aircraft and also for the simulator, which is here, which is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, Navigraph is the better out of the paid subscription services when it comes to navigational data. Now the first step we're going to do is we're going to open our client to allow us to connect to Vatsim, which is in this case vPilot. So once you've got vPilot installed, you'll get something that looks a little bit like this. That will just do a couple of things, checking your directory for different model matching and stuff like that, and then you'll be presented with something like this. Now this looks a little bit complicated, but it's really not too menacing. The main thing that you're going to need to do is once you go into your settings, you need to ensure that you've got your Vatsim CID, your Vatsim password, the name that you put in. So what is acceptable on Vatsim is either your name, your full name, alternatively you can simply just put your Vatsim CID, your home airport, which is again isn't massively relevant how up to date it is, but it's just to give people an idea of roughly where you're from. And last but not least is the Vatsim server you wish to connect to, which in this case we will use as automatic. Now you can decide to use model matching, that's a different video, but model matching essentially is something I don't have installed for Flight Sim at the moment, and that will basically give you some information on what these aircraft are, and it would show this as maybe like an EasyJet A320 or another Ryanair aircraft, something like that. The main things you need to make sure you set up is your push to talk, so you can assign a button. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to the trigger button on my joystick. Once we get there we go. And you also need to make sure that your audio is set up properly, so you've got your microphone and output device, and you can also see that your mic volume is registering within the green, somewhere like that. It's up to you if you want to disable the audio effects, that just helps with the immersion. You don't have to do it, but you can do that. And then obviously you're ready with the settings and the first setup. Now what you want to do is obviously you remember on our SimBrief plan, we planned what our call sign was going to be. So in this case, we are Ryanair 12 Alpha November. Now in type code you type in an aircraft. So for this case we're 737, you can see it's got all the options here. And the main one we're looking for is a 737 MAX 8. We're not a BBJ, which is a business jet, so we can select B38M. And a cell code is not relevant, that's only if you're doing transatlantic flights. So we connect to the network, you'll get a couple of welcome messages, and you should, if you're at a busy airport, see some aircraft appear around you, including an aircraft there. And this brings us nicely onto what we can do if we spawn on top of another aircraft and how we can move. So when you spawn in on Vatsim, you want to check around you to ensure that you're not spawning on anyone or conflicting on any aircraft. And as you can see, what we've done here is we have conflicted with this aircraft here. He was on the network first. So as you can hear in the background, we are using GSX for our ground services, pushback services and anything else, and I do highly recommend GSX in order to make sure that you are able to do everything that air traffic control asks of you. So if you're presented with a circumstance where you find that you have spawned in another aircraft, and you know you're on stand 43, you can open up your GSX menu, and you can go to reposition aircraft. This will give you an option to select where you want, so we go to gate, scroll through the menus, and we're going to look for 43 right. We select 43 right, warp, and as you can see, we've now moved on to 43 right, so we are no longer conflicting with that aircraft there. And then you can reactivate your services required from GSX, select through the menus, and then it will respawn all of the ground equipment ready to give you what you need. Now, by all means, GSX isn't perfect, but it is absolutely, in my opinion, the best software to use and the most immersive. Now, once you've connected onto Vatsim, you can see that you've got some information here. If I make this a bit bigger, you see some information on what's going on, and you can see what frequencies and controllers are online. So you can see here we've got an example of what happens when there is no lower air traffic control, but you have a particular controller who is providing something called top-down cover. So you know this is occurring because you can see down here you've got an ATIS for Stansted, and this will give you a little crash course on how to identify who the controller is that you need to initially contact and what to do. So when you log into Vatsim, once you put in your information, so you've connected using your call sign and you've connected using your relevant equipment code, you can also see that it will automatically grab your flight plan from SimBrief that you've pre-filed on Vatsim, and then that should all be ready to go. So when you move over to the ATIS, you can double click your ATIS, and that provides you a text-based ATIS information. And you can see we've got information alpha. Take a note of information alpha, you'll need it. So write that down somewhere. And you can see that was appropriate at time 1850 Zulu, which, as of the time of recording, is approximately 25 minutes ago. You can see runway 22 is the runway in use. You can just hear GSX talking in the background. And you can see certain NOTAMs, so the RNP Yankee procedure is not available. Departing aircraft are to make initial contact with London Control on 132.605. So you can see that London South Central here is the relevant air traffic control we need to make contact with to gather our clearances.
Departure checks completed.
And that is who we will be contacting very shortly. So, a little bit of information here as to what they require from you. The first thing that you need to remember is there are a certain amount of different bits of information that the air traffic controllers need from you when you are requesting your IFR clearance. The first thing you need to do is you will need to make a note of what stand you're on. So we know we're on stand 43 right. Once you've read the ATIS, you can then gather the information from the ATIS. So you know that from the ATIS we're on information alpha. You can tell us runway 22, and the QNH is 1037. So when we contact the controller, we're going to tell them we have information alpha, so that they know we have read this information, we know exactly what it is, what's going on, and they don't need to then relay to us the QNH and relevant air weather information as well. Obviously, we've then got our stand number. We need to relay our aircraft type to them, so we need to let them know that we're in a 737 MAX 8, so they know what kind of performance information we have, where we can depart from along the runway, and that kind of thing. We also need to notify them where we're going so that they can cross-reference that with the flight plan that is currently on their system in front of them. So we'd then be telling them we're requesting clearance to Manchester. And then we would ensure that we get that all in a nice little line to make it nice and easy for air traffic control. So to provide an example of a typical clearance that we would ask from air traffic control is as follows. So we would call up London Control. This is Ryanair 12 Alpha November, requesting IFR clearance to Manchester. That's your first bit, so we're asking them for IFR clearance. We're talking to them so we know that they know we know who they are. Requesting IFR clearance to Manchester. We are a Boeing 737-800 on stand 43 right with information alpha on board. Now that is what you'd give if you've got aerodrome control, things like tower, approach, ground, delivery. But one thing, if we're talking to a en route controller, like London South Central, is just simply notify them where exactly we are. So I would also add on the ground at Stansted, somewhere in that clearance where it makes sense. We will go through a practical demonstration in a second, but that's some of the things you'll need to write down to prepare yourself to request your clearance. Now what I would typically do is I would write it down here. So I would say Manchester, Info Alpha, 737-800M, or my max 800, sorry, and then stand 43 right. That gives me the basic information that I need, so I can just quickly cross-reference that if I need to when I'm in the process of talking to the controller, so that then we don't get it wrong. Now, what can we expect the controller to reply with? They are often very busy, and they will often tell you to stand by. Now, when it comes to priorities for a controller, an aircraft requesting clearance is the lowest of that priority. It is not going to be on the top of their list to give you your clearance straight away, and as such, when you go to request your clearance, you may just be straight away told to stand by. You may be acknowledged, so something along the lines of Ryanair 12 Alpha November, London Control, hello, stand by. Alternatively, you may then get your clearance straight back, which is always possible. Now, when you get your clearance back, you can expect the same information that you've given, mostly, to be read back to you. What they won't read back is this bit of information here, your aircraft type or stand number. What they will read back to you potentially is the information or the QNH. But what you can expect a typical readback from control to look like is something along the lines of your SID that you have asked for, the squawk code you have been allocated, we will cover that in just a second, what the squawk code is, and it will also cover any other relevant information that they have given you. Now, in this case, if we reopen the PDF of our flight plan, we will be able to see that we have filed on the Utava 1 Romeo departure. So we can fully expect that to be the departure that we get given. So we can pop this in here, just to remind ourselves. So when the controller will call us back, they might say something along the lines of Ryanair 12 Alpha November, London Control, good evening. You are cleared to Manchester, so they're giving you your clearance to that destination via the Utava 1 Romeo departure. Squawk, let's say in this case 1, 2, 3, 4. And they might then give you the QNH, or they might then give you any relevant information like initial climb and stuff like that. And of course, where in the globe you go will also change slightly how that clearance is issued, but the main principle is the same. And once you've received that clearance, it is then your job to read the clearance back to the controller to again let them know that you know exactly what they want and what you've told them, and they can clarify to make sure that, again, you have been and received the relevant information and received it correctly. So in this case, we'd read back, we'd go, Roger, cleared to Manchester, Utava 1 Romeo departure, squawk 1234, Ryanair 12 Alpha November. Now, a little tip when it comes to talking on the radio. There are two main forms of transmission when it comes to the call sign and the call sign positioning. When you are first communicating to someone, you would put your call sign at the start, like you're saying, hello, I am. So, for example, London Control, Ryanair 12 Alpha November is requesting clearance. So you're putting your call sign at the start to identify who you are. When you're reading back a clearance, you would put your call sign at the end, as in you're signing off. So, Roger, all received, Ryanair 12 Alpha November. Putting that at the end, finishing your communication, you've signed off. Now, you can jiggle that around. It doesn't matter as long as you get your call sign in there, and as long as that all is fine. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to make contact with London. We're going to find a suitable position in their radio traffic in order to call them up and ask for our clearance. So this isn't going to be a tutorial on how to fly the aircraft. So when we look on our vPilot display, we can see that London South Central is 132.605, and that corresponds with the frequency listed on the ATIS. So what we want to do is we want to program in 132.605. So we're going to wait for a break in their air traffic talk.
ED 37 Whiskey.
So you can see they're a little bit busy, but we're going to pick a moment that they're not getting a readback.
Descend, fly level 200.
And we're going to pick a moment that we think that they're not about to talk. For example, that there would have been a good moment. And there may also be one after this readback here.
Unicom, thank you very much. Cheers, Steve.
And we'll try and pop in a little bit after here. As soon as we get a second. It's important that you wait to make sure that a readback has been done. So once they've given their communication, then the aircraft will read back the instruction. Then we can speak.
When ready to send flight level
so again, the controller is providing their instruction, and then the readback, and then your break.
City Island 310, contact London Control.
So the important bit is to make sure that you wait until the communication has been concluded. We've waited for a readback, and there's a suitable
Shuttle 9
break in
Hotel,
those
descend flight level
communications.
130.
So obviously, with this example, London is very busy, so you need to pick your moment properly.
Flight level
I can't
25.
emphasise enough how important it is to pick your moments. London, good evening. This is Rhino 12 Alpha November on the ground at Stansted. We're looking for clearance to Manchester, please. Information Alpha on board. 737 MAX 8 on stand 43 right.
Rhino 12 Alpha November, London, I
Right,
haven't
now
got
we
a
listen
flight
up.
plan. If you could just file one for me, please.
No worries.
Rhino 12 Alpha November, I have your clearance when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Please, Rhino 12 Alpha November, cleared Manchester, Utava 1 Romeo, squawk 2732.
2732. Roger, cleared Manchester, Utava 1 Romeo, departure 2732 for the squawk, Rhino 12 Alpha November. Okay, so that's our clearance. As expected, we have been given the standard clearance, Manchester, Utava 1 Romeo, and our squawk code of 2732 has been issued. We put that in the box. And you can see that that is our squawk code ready. So the squawk code is, in short, an identifier code given to you by air traffic control to identify you from other aircraft. It's like a name additional to your call sign. So this will show up on people's radars displays so they can see who you are, and it will provide all the information relevant that the transponder can provide. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the aircraft is set up, ready for departure. I'm going to do that, and I will catch the video once we are ready for pushback.
Flight level 140.
Okay, so the aircraft is set up and ready for push.
London, climb flight level
What we can do now is we have prepared our GSX ready for a direction of push. Now we know we're going to get a nose right, tail left. We know this because as we look at our particular ground charts, we can go to the airport here, and we can see that we're not going to get a nose left because that will push us out onto the terminal building. We get a nose right.
Shamrock 362, London Control,
so
good evening.
Know we're going to have to reset the GSX menu. It does do this sometimes.
347.
So we'll continue our pushback because it's timed out. Don't want de-icing treatment, and we'll go nose right, tail left. And this is at the point that we will request clearance when we are ready to push immediately. Not when we're just requesting pushback, no, we need to be ready immediately straight away. So similar communications to air traffic control. It is going to be our call sign, Rhino 12 Alpha November, requesting push and start. That's all you need to do. Nice and easy. London, Rhino 12 Alpha November, requesting push and start.
Rhino 12 Alpha November, hold position, contact Stansted ground 121.730.
Over to Stansted ground, Rhino 12 Alpha November, thank you. Okay, lovely. So what's happened is Stansted ground, in the meantime, has logged in. You can see Stansted ground here. It's on 121.730. So this will be our next protocol. So we'll give ground a second. Ground, good day, Rhino 12 Alpha November for push and start, stand 43 right.
Rhino 95 Bravo, stand 64 left, push and start approved. 64 left, push start approved, Rhino 95 Bravo.
Release parking brakes, please.
Rhino 12 Alpha November, stand 43 right, push and start approved.
Push and start approved, stand 43 right. Rhino 12 Alpha November.
Commencing push.
There we go, commencing push. Engines are cleared, so we'll get them started. So we're going to start engine 2, making sure the packs are off, and the APU bleeder's on. Then the engine will start up. Not sure what GSX is doing. So we're going to ignore GSX here on the basis that this is one of the disadvantages of GSX, is that it doesn't entirely know what it's doing all the time. Now, one thing that air traffic control will be familiar with is GSX and the shenanigans that it regularly pulls, as well as the blinds being pulled down. So whilst you're pushing back, make sure you get your engine started, get yourself ready for pushback. Don't leave it until you're ready for taxi. But this is also a very real example of what can happen when you're on the network. So please don't be alarmed if this kind of thing happens. Yes, I could cut around it, I could reset and I could start again, but there's no need. Because showing you that these kind of mistakes are acceptable is part of the process. When you're new on Vatsim, you are new, and it is understandable that things like this might happen. GSX might have a meltdown, you might not understand your communication properly, or in my case,
Stansted
your
ground,
flight plan might not have
Echo
filed
Victor,
properly.
RJ100, taxiway Charlie East, ready
And
for
obviously what we
taxi
just did is we
to
refilled the
the
flight
active.
plan, came through, and London had it ready for us there. So now, we are at the conclusion of this episode, because the next step will be to request your taxi. So hopefully that's all made sense. If you have any questions, pop them in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next episode, where we can then discuss how we get a taxi request, how we move forward from this point, and how we go beyond there. Thanks for watching.